these new providers. Home alone, aging is a home alone experience. Do you know the fastest growing population of people out there are now living by themselves? 40% on average of women over age 65 live in homes of one. And this is continuing. So whether it's empty nest or aging in place and the like, the world is getting, shall we say, profoundly smaller. So what I predict for you with the aging of the population is a much smaller world, not in terms of necessarily the real estate, but the number of people. But that's got a bigger impact on something else. Have you noticed the shopping carts lately? This is the fastest growing shopping cart, the small one. So as we start thinking about the big house and the big box and the big community, where's the big demand going to come from? As we have women living by themselves, not really finding Walmart trucking through 5 acres of parking lot and 10 acres of store to find a case of food this large. So whether it's packaging or the store, even Walmart has been reporting themselves, as well as the business journals, that they're starting to have a little concern and that the new format retail of the future is going to be a lot smaller, not just to squeeze into urban locations, but frankly to squeeze into your life elsewhere. So in sum, I'd like to say to you that I think the future is going to be the following: gray, small, and female. So what does this mean for you? I would say that from an aging perspective, the home is now going to evolve more as a services platform. We are going to need to find ways to engineer places for these services to be delivered, for services to be accessed, whether it's for appliances to be changed in and out. The technology is going to become a commodity. Do not start building things for a microwave that looks like X, because that microwave or the health systems or the telemonitoring systems that are going to be used for you or your parents or your children are going to be changed out and given to you much like your cell phone. It's going to be the service that is going to be how we pay. Community livability is going to become the new metric and opportunity to either fill in where I'm aging in place or to find new communities that we want. We want diversity of activities, both in residential and real estate choices. And the desire to age in place is going to drive home modifications, if you will, and I predict may stall sales where we would have thought new sales would have been possible. Smaller households, it's going to be a challenge to that big box format. We should now stop thinking about downsizing, frankly, to the real understanding of how the consumer lives, to what I'd like to call real sizing. As aging becomes the home alone experience, the community, the home, and retail services will be sought around convenience and care. So I don't want you to build old man workplaces, old women housing, or the like. I don't want you to call anything old or mature or an active adult, because one of the things I can tell you from the lab and from business across outside of real estate, if you build anything for an older adult, I can guarantee you this: a younger adult won't touch it, but increasingly neither will an older adult. Because the baby boomers are no longer young, but they are perennially youthful. And lastly, the feminization of real estate. Additional and extended workforce participation will drive women into more active living, and if they can jumpstart their husbands, perhaps them as well. Greater demand for social yet physically supportive spaces. Keep in mind, aging is not for wusses, but we have to redesign the workplace to be able to have better lighting, be able to access, and yeah, it's not a blind spot in your car, your neck has gotten a lot stiffer. Older female fragility and safety is going to demand serious changes in how we design everything from workplaces as well as retail and playing. So keep in mind what women in particular always seem to be either saddled or love to do. They are the caregivers. So it's not just about whether a middle-aged woman can navigate a residential space. Can you help her with her mother? So on that note, according to my twin brother here, if one baby boomer is turning roughly 65 every 7 or so seconds, the sense of urgency that our opening speaker gave us, about 200 of your market just turned 65. Thank you very much.
Joe, thank you very much for all that early morning food for thought. I did neglect to mention before that we're going to hold off questions till the end. All the panelists will be here, and I think we'll get a healthy dialogue after everyone's made their presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Whitley from Nielsen.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. That was certainly an earful. That was very interesting. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate that. But a kind of a good segue for my presentation. And it's dealing with demographic change. And I certainly can't cover too much in 20 minutes, but there's a lot to cover. But I will give you a good perspective on what we're seeing at Nielsen through our research and through all of the consumer research that we do, the various panels and access to the data we have, the demographics and the changing demographics and what have you. And I'll try to boil this down into a perspective just to give you some additional food for thought. Just to make sure that everyone understands who Nielsen is and what we do. People have approached me and said, well, you're the media people, or you're the product research people, or you're the people that, that do special studies on behalf of companies. Well, we do a lot of different things. We're a very large company, but let me boil it down for you as to what Nielsen does. What do we do in Nielsen Retail? Well, first of all, very simple. We help companies understand and find consumers who want to buy. Requires consumer insight. And then at the core of the discovery process, when we meet with clients and consulting companies and what have you, we ask two fundamental questions. How will you take action and how will you measure success? And then with that knowledge and with the information that we gather on their behalf, we make our solutions sustainable by integrating them with their day-to-day operations. That's what Nielsen does as a company. And that's our business model. Now, we are looking at a tremendous shift in the paradigm. Having been in real estate for over 25 years, at one time it was very easy to ride the coattails of a baby boom generation. It was predictable. We knew who they were. We knew what they made in income. Mass marketing was very much a way to attract and to follow that baby boom generation. Well, today, I don't want to diminish the fact that baby boomers aren't important. Right now, they comprise about 37% of our population and 47% of our income. But they are slowly retiring and getting out of the mainstream. But there's a changing demographic, and there's a fabric beneath and behind the baby boom generation. And that's what I really want to focus on today, is the impact, or the impact of these changes that are going on, and what that means to the marketer, the real estate developer, to the planner, and all the people out there who have an association to need to understand the demographic and how we tie into the demographic and how do we attract more of them for our products and services, whatever we may want to offer. Now, I'll boil it down to you for you. There's certainly a lot of research that went into these final conclusions, but again, Joe mentioned a lot about the aging population. And if we look at what has happened in the 20th century and all the things that have gone on in the 20th century with the declining fertility rates, the baby boom generation kind of aging and kind of working its way out of the marketplace, and it leads to really 5 key trends for the 21st century. First is the uneven population growth. It's no longer an even playing field as it used to be. We're seeing a decline in the percentage of households with children. We've talked about that. Immigration and growth in the ethnic families. That's where our growth is going to come from at the family unit, and we'll talk about that in a few moments and what that means. The older consumers with new needs and the changes in the per household spending. All of that is changing. All of that has to be dealt with in some way, shape, or form as you plan your investment strategies moving forward for products and services. Now, what are the economics of a changing demographic? Well, to boil it down for you, first of all, we do know from our research, looking at the trends in demographics, that the households closest to the poverty line will grow the most at the expense of all others, but especially the middle. We're seeing that in our research. Price and value will gain in importance in consumers' purchasing decisions. That we're looking at a whole different way of how people make purchase decisions. It used to be where I would take the first thing off the shelf, and sometimes the most expensive thing off the shelf, because I felt that it gave me better value. Coupon, as a result of the economic downturn, coupon usage actually increased 15% across the entire income strata. It didn't stop at any one particular level of income. It went up 15% from the previous year, and it's continuing to move in that direction. People are also looking at alternative purchase decisions. They're not necessarily going after the branded merchandise, the generic goods are going up, and in terms of demand and consumption. And a lot of your department store chains, a lot of your consumer durables companies are starting to move more in a direction of providing a generic alternative to the branded merchandise and are marketing it accordingly. Value is going to be very important moving forward. Brands and categories with strong skews to households with children will experience a demographic drag from slow growth. I was telling someone earlier today that the percentage of households with children is right now around 32%. In the next 10 years, that number will be below 30%, more like 27%, and that's the trend. Families are shrinking in size. And where that growth is going to come from is from immigration. It's not going to come from what we have here in the United States today. And then the brands with the older consumer franchises could enjoy a growth boom, but beware of the cohort effects. And we'll be talking a little bit more about cohorts, because that's a very important part of this process, is how to deal with a changing demographic. Households with children will continue to decrease in share, and average household size will decrease. Families with children become more ethnic more quickly than the total population, as what I'd mentioned. And then multicultural marketing will not be an option. I spend more hours talking to companies about how to tap into the entire demographic fabric that we're faced with today. And a lot of it goes back to handling this one particular issue, multicultural marketing. How do we tap into trends in the marketplace with regard to certain ethnic groups that are now formulating the core of our demographics? And what this means is, if you take nothing else away from this presentation today, what we're looking at are very diverse consumer segments. We're looking at a multicultural shift. We're looking at an aging population. And on top of that, we're looking at economically distressed sectors of the population. And again, the growth is going to be around the poverty area, and the poverty area, and not necessarily the newer affluent areas of the economy, and a shrinking pie. And so what that means is that as the baby boomers retire, go away, we're going to have a flat growth curve. We're going to be less than 1% in growth over the next decade for sure. And what that means is that we're going to have a shrinking pie, a shrinking demographic within the landscape, which translates into a shrinking demand. Now, how do you deal with it? And how do we as a company deal with it, as well as other companies that are in the business of really tracking customer demand and demographics, and really trying to translate that into a strategy on behalf of these companies that make the products and that actually build the real estate and do the planning? Well, one way to do this is through segmentation. Now, Prism is just one tool that we use. It's our own proprietary tool, but there's so many different tools that are available in the marketplace. But what it means is that we take the entire landscape and we break it down into manageable components, And so basically what we try to do is to understand in these manageable components just what that demand is, what that translates into, the types of products that these people typically buy, where they live, how much they spend, what their media preferences are, et cetera. And Prism actually classifies every household in the country into 66 segments, and that's every household. You have one segment assigned to your household, your neighbor has another. And essentially what we do is we describe these households in terms of their urbanicity, in terms of their income, the age of householders, the family composition, as well as the home ownership. And then from that, what we also do is within that framework, we actually look at the life stage composition, because that's a very important component of the mix. And then what it helps us to do is it helps us to understand within each of those groups that we have actually classified, helps us to understand what their consumption patterns are, where they buy, what they buy, their media preferences, and things of that nature. And so that's the whole backdrop behind using segmentation. So what you can do